Have you ever felt like the moment you stopped trying, she started noticing you more? Have you ever been ignored when you gave your all, only to suddenly become important the moment you went quiet? Why is it that when you speak your mind, you're dismissed, but when you stop speaking altogether, she starts chasing? Listen carefully. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's powerful. She wasn't drawn to your words. She was drawn to the control she thought she had over your attention. But when you cut it off, when you stopped explaining, stopped apologizing, stopped trying to be understood, that's when she felt the fear. That's when her confidence cracked. That's when the power shifted, and it shifted to you. Before we go deep, drop this in the comments right now. Silence is power. This is the beginning of reclaiming your mind, your peace, and your power, not just in relationships, but in every area of your life. Number 1, she only feels powerful when you engage. When you stop giving her your attention, her entire reality starts to unravel, and most men don't even realize the gravity of that power. Her sense of superiority, confidence, and identity is often a house built on sand, and your attention is the only thing holding the walls up. You need to understand this dynamic to the bone. She doesn't feel powerful when she's alone. She feels powerful when you are still responding, when you're explaining yourself, arguing back, showing up emotionally, pleading for clarity. That's when she knows she's got you on a string. And let's be brutally honest, most women today don't want love. They want power. They want emotional leverage. They want to control how you feel, when you feel it, and how much of your energy gets poured back into them. So every time you engage, every argument, every late night text, every moment you try to make her see your worth, you're feeding a machine designed to keep you confused, exhausted, and emotionally enslaved. She'll provoke you, push you, twist your words, cry on cue, or even pretend to be the victim, not because she's in pain, but because she's losing grip. Her ability to sway your emotional state is her real drug. Your reactions are her proof that she still owns real estate in your mind. But when you go still, not to play games, but because you genuinely detach, her script falls apart. She doesn't know what to do with a man who doesn't dance to her rhythm. Her performance needs an audience, and once you walk out of that theater, she's standing on a stage, alone, with no one to impress. That silence cuts deeper than any insult, because it's not empty, it's final. And when you stop being the man who seeks her understanding and become the man who walks in truth whether she gets it or not, you step into a different league entirely. You become the one she thinks about, stalks from a distance, and regrets losing. But here's what matters more. You stop being the man who betrays himself for her attention. That's the real freedom. That's the win. And that's what breaks her illusion of power. It's not about punishing her. It's about choosing you. Your focus becomes sacred. Your time becomes non-negotiable. You're no longer emotionally renting space to someone who only values you when you're hurting. From that day on, you stop needing her validation because you've outgrown the boy who needed to be seen and stepped into the man who sees himself. You begin to see that your peace isn't up for negotiation, that you don't owe her closure, you don't owe her replies, and you definitely don't owe her the emotional roller coaster she's trying to drag you into. Instead, you start investing that time back into yourself. You work out harder, you stack more wins, you read more books, you build your craft. You become valuable not just to women, but to the world. You become dangerous, not because you're violent, but because you're unshakable. Not because you're cruel, but because you're untouchable. And when she senses that you're no longer emotionally reachable, that her usual tactics don't even move you anymore, that's when fear sets in. Not the fear of losing you, but the fear of never being able to control you again. You become the man she tells her friends about with confused eyes. the one she can't figure out, the one she says just changed when really you just healed. You saw through the illusion, and now every time she tries to bait you with her usual tricks, she only finds silence. Not silence as a tactic, but silence as your natural state of peace. Because you're done explaining yourself, you're done chasing, you're done proving. You know your value, and you refuse to trade it for breadcrumbs of affection. That's what terrifies her, and that's what sets you free, and that's what sets you free. But most men stop there, knowing the truth, but not knowing what to do next. That's why I created the Stoic Relationship Blueprint, linked in the comments. If you've ever asked yourself, how do I stop giving my power away? How do I rebuild myself after years of emotional chaos? Or how do I finally become untouchable without turning cold? This book answers it all. It's not just information. It's a roadmap, a manual you'll keep forever. Every principle, every strategy, every mindset shift, always there when you need it most. Whether you're healing now or years from now, this blueprint will still speak to you, guide you, and remind you of who you are. Click the link, own it once, keep it for life. Number 2, no response equals no validation equals internal collapse. Most men don't realize how deeply their presence feeds her ego until they remove it, and when they do, the shift is immediate and devastating. The moment you stop replying, stop reacting, stop pouring out emotional resources she didn't earn, you expose just how dependent she was on your validation to maintain the facade she calls confidence. She's built an entire identity on the assumption that you would always be available, always be explaining, always be decoding her mixed signals like a slave begging for clarity. And she never expected that version of you could vanish. But the truth is, you were never invisible to her. You were just useful. You existed to respond, to engage, to fight, to comfort, to break down and rebuild under her terms. And when you stop playing that role, her inner world starts to fracture. Because now, without your emotional response, she has nothing to measure herself against. Her performance loses its applause. Her manipulation loses its meaning. Your silence is not just empty space. It's a mirror that reflects back everything she's been trying to avoid. Her own fear of inadequacy, her own guilt, her own lack of self-worth. And this is the part most men don't get. When you stop responding, you're not hurting her. You're forcing her to face herself. That's a pain no man can inflict. It's a war inside her own head. She opens her phone and sees no new messages. She posts something online and you don't like it. She walks into a room expecting tension and gets nothing but indifference. It's not rejection, it's irrelevance. And to a woman who built her worth around being wanted, that's psychological warfare. You become the one man who can't be reached, can't be baited, can't be provoked into explaining himself. And that makes her panic. Because now she starts questioning everything. Was she ever that attractive? Did she lose you? Have you found better? Is she not enough? That uncertainty starts to eat her alive. It triggers the very insecurities she projects onto everyone else, but never deals with herself. She'll start reaching out, subtly at first, liking your posts, checking your stories, sending passive messages like, "Hope you're okay," not out of love, but out of confusion. She's trying to test if you still exist inside the prison she built for you. But when your reaction doesn't come, when your validation never arrives, she spirals. And the more she spirals, the more she exposes what she really feared all along, that she never had power. She only had access. And access is not the same as ownership. Your validation gave her a sense of importance that she didn't earn. It filled a void that wasn't your responsibility to manage. And now, without that supply, she has to sit in silence with questions she hoped you'd always be too emotional to stop asking yourself. But you've stopped. You've moved on. And more importantly, you've moved inward. You've taken that energy and reallocated it to something with a return. Your body, your money, your mission, your purpose. You're not ignoring her. You're investing in yourself. And now she feels the difference. Because now, the man she once controlled emotionally is the man she can no longer access mentally. You've become emotionally unapproachable, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. You're no longer operating from lack, from desperation, from the hunger to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. You've withdrawn not out of fear, but out of strength. And that withdrawal dismantles everything she thought she built between you. Because the truth is, she wasn't confident. She was just reacting to how much you cared. And when your care no longer funds her ego, the collapse begins. Not with a bang, but with a slow, painful unraveling of every illusion she held about her control. You want to rebuild your life from this? Then stop being the man who tries to win her attention and become the man who wins his own respect. Block the distractions. Create structure. Write down your goals. Break them into actions you can take today. Wake up earlier. Clean your environment. Track your habits. Stop giving power to people who only love the version of you that sacrifices himself. The new version of you doesn't negotiate with chaos. He builds order. He moves in silence. Not to be petty, but because the next version of him demands focus. She doesn't need another text. She needs the absence of one, because that absence says more than 1,000 explanations ever could. It tells her she's no longer the center of your world. And when a woman loses that position, she loses the illusion that gave her confidence. She becomes a visitor in the kingdom she thought she ruled. And that kingdom now has a king who no longer kneels. You are not here to validate her. You are here to validate your own life. Number 3, she's now left to face her own insecurities. When you finally pull back, not because you're angry, not to manipulate her, but because you're simply exhausted from bleeding energy into someone who uses it as fuel for power games, what you're really doing is forcing her to confront the one thing she's spent her whole life avoiding: herself. She's not used to silence that isn't chasing her. She's used to men folding, begging, explaining. She's used to getting the last word, posting cryptic messages, throwing emotional grenades and watching the fallout. But now, she stands in front of a mirror with no applause, no audience, and no feedback loop to feed her ego. And for someone who's defined herself through other people's reactions, especially yours, that silence becomes unbearable. Most women today aren't taught to build internal confidence. They're taught to curate external validation. They dress not for themselves, but for reactions. They post for likes. They test for control. They flirt not to connect, but to compete. And when they can't extract an emotional return from you, they're left in a vacuum. That vacuum doesn't feel empowering. It feels humiliating. It exposes every part of her that's undeveloped, unhealed, and emotionally immature. She starts to see the cracks in her reflection, the vanity that masked insecurity, the games that covered fear, the drama that distracted from emptiness. And while she might not say it out loud, she starts to sense that her entire identity was built on your willingness to react. But now you don't. And because of that, she's trapped in a loop of overthinking. She wonders if you've moved on. She checks who you follow. She reads into your silence, trying to find clues to a puzzle you're no longer playing. Her friends ask if she's okay. She pretends not to care. But inside, she's collapsing. Because you're not playing along anymore. You're not validating her with pain. You're not giving her the satisfaction of knowing she still gets to you. And for the first time in a long time, she realizes she can't reach you. Not because you blocked her, not because you ghosted her, but because you evolved past needing to explain yourself to someone who never truly tried to understand you in the first place. You've reached a level of emotional independence that makes you immune to the traps she set. You've started to see through the patterns, the hot and cold, the passive-aggressive jabs, the fake vulnerability designed to pull you back in. And instead of playing therapist, instead of bending over backwards to decode her moods, you chose peace. You chose your path. And now she sits in that void, alone, questioning if she ever mattered to you, questioning if she pushed too far, questioning if she made a mistake by trying to test your worth instead of recognize it. And this is where your power becomes undeniable, not because you're cruel, not because you're superior, but because you finally stopped betraying yourself to keep someone else comfortable. You chose clarity over confusion. You chose dignity over approval. You stopped trying to save someone who was drowning you to stay afloat. And now she has to sit in that silence and ask herself the question she's been dodging for years. Why do I need someone else's pain to feel valuable? Why do I only feel powerful when someone is broken beneath me? And when she can't answer that question, when she realizes she never really had the emotional maturity to handle the version of you who finally chose himself, she will either be forced to grow or spiral. Most spiral, but that's not your responsibility. Your role was never to fix her. Your role was to fix you. And that begins by removing yourself from environments where your pain is treated as her proof of control. Now you're not angry. You're focused. You're quiet, not because you're wounded, but because you're building. And she knows. She feels that shift. Because deep down, she remembers every word she said to push you, every test she threw to measure how much you'd break, every manipulation she used to get her way. And she sees it now. None of it worked. Because you're not looking back. You're not playing the old game. You're rewriting the rules. You're living in truth. And that truth is a light she's not ready to stand under. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't need to be understood by someone who weaponized your empathy. What you need is to keep building, to keep growing, to keep choosing yourself, even when it's lonely, even when it's silent. Because every time you don't react, every time you stay grounded, you gain back pieces of yourself that were scattered trying to please someone who never respected your worth in the first place. This is what transformation looks like. This is the storm that births peace. This is what it means to face your pain, rise through it, and become the kind of man who cannot be moved. Not because he's cold, but because he's complete. And once you become complete, the need to be seen fades. You no longer crave her reaction, her recognition, or her regret. You simply walk away knowing that what she's left with is not your silence, but her own reflection. And for her, that is the scariest sound in the world. Number 4. You become the scarcity she can't replace. When you begin to detach from the games, the cycles, the emotional noise, and redirect your focus toward building something greater than her validation, you immediately shift the dynamic from being one of a replaceable source of attention to becoming something far more valuable, scarce. Scarcity isn't just about not being available. Scarcity is about value, self-control, and the undeniable reality that you are no longer someone she can access on command. And the truth is, most men give themselves away too easily. From the first compliment to the instant reply, to the dropped plans just to see her, to the constant reassurance after every emotional swing, you trained her to expect that no matter what she does, disrespect, flakiness, mixed signals, you'll still be there. That you're the safe bet, the man who will wait. But what happens when the safe bet suddenly disappears? Not because you're sulking or playing a role, but because you've grown. What happens when the man who used to orbit around her mood swings is now locked into his discipline, focused on his vision, and no longer gives her the reaction she relies on to feel significant? She starts to feel the shift instantly. She no longer feels central. She no longer feels in control. And here's the twist. She doesn't just miss you. She misses the power she had over you. She misses knowing exactly how to trigger your attention. She misses being able to text something cryptic and get an immediate reaction. But now, you've become unbothered, unreadable, unreachable, and that creates a vacuum of insecurity she can't explain. She doesn't fear losing you because of who you were. She fears never getting access to who you're becoming. Because now, the man who once overinvested in her emotional whims is building value that has nothing to do with her approval. You're leveling up. You're getting stronger. You're taking care of your body. You're applying yourself like never before. You're becoming someone people want to know, not someone begging to be noticed. And in doing so, you become the type of man who is not just rare, but irreplaceable. Let's be real. Most men today are chasing. They're desperate for female validation. They post for attention. They message with hope. They lose sleep over women who couldn't care less. But not you. Not anymore. Because you've realized something most men never do. That your attention, your energy, your mind, it's your currency. And when you start treating it like gold, people treat you differently. She treats you differently. She starts to question what changed. She tries to retrace her steps. She might try to test you again, flirt, hint, open old wounds, just to see if the old you still lives behind the silence. But when your focus doesn't break, when your priorities remain unmoved, she knows this isn't a phase. This is your evolution. And in that moment, you become the standard she will compare every other man to, and fail. Because she'll never admit it out loud. But she knows she had access to something extraordinary and treated it like it was disposable. Now, she watches from the sidelines as that disposable man becomes the kind of man she can't even reach. Not because you're ignoring her, but because you've transcended the game entirely. Your life no longer revolves around being chosen. You are the chooser now, and the chooser doesn't chase. The chooser doesn't explain. The chooser doesn't apologize for rising. You've become a scarcity, not by hiding, but by growing. By stepping so far into your purpose that any woman who wants to be part of your life must now rise to your level or be left behind. You've become a man whose presence is felt in his absence, whose silence carries more weight than words, whose indifference signals mastery, not malice. And the best part, you didn't have to yell, post cryptic messages, or beg to be seen. You simply became better. And in becoming better, you became rare. You became the man she tells her friends about, the one she couldn't figure out, the one who just changed. But you didn't change. You just stopped settling. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped giving time to people who treat it like it's infinite. You stopped wasting your energy on people who only value you when you're bleeding for them. Now you value your time. You protect your peace. You guard your energy. And because of that, you've become something she cannot replace. Not with attention, not with games, not even with another man. Because no other man will be you. And the moment she realizes that, she'll never forget it. But by then, you'll be too focused to care. Number 5, her power dies in the echo of your absence. When you stop responding, not to manipulate, not to punish, but because you've truly detached from a toxic system, what you're really doing is pulling the plug on her entire emotional operating system, and it's in that void where her false sense of power begins to disintegrate. Most men have no idea how much leverage they hand over with every emotional reaction, every defensive explanation, every just wanted to check on you message sent in moments of weakness. And what makes it worse is that they think being available, emotionally expressive, and attentive will earn her love. But she doesn't love availability, she loves control. She doesn't admire your vulnerability when she can weaponize it. She doesn't value your loyalty if it's handed over too easily. and she doesn't respect your presence if it's constant and unquestioned. What she does respond to, however, is scarcity, emotional scarcity, energetic scarcity. The kind of absence that isn't angry or bitter, but complete. When a man withdraws and no longer feeds into the cycle, when he no longer seeks closure or connection or resolution from someone who only ever saw his feelings as leverage, that's when everything shifts. Because her power didn't come from who she was, it came from how much of you she could manipulate. But now, without your reaction, without your emotional dependency, she's left to sit with silence that she can't break. And that silence echoes back to her everything she's been avoiding. Her insecurity, her guilt, her declining influence. That silence is no longer your retreat, it's her exposure. She starts to feel it not just in the quiet, but in the way your energy no longer bends to her rhythm. She feels it when you don't look twice, when your replies are short and consistent, when you don't ask questions, when you no longer seek validation or send follow-ups. She feels it when you smile, but no longer soften, when you stand tall, and your eyes no longer look for her reaction. And deep down, she knows it's over, not just the relationship, but her reign over your emotional state. She knows that whatever power she once held through emotional leverage is gone, and it died the moment you stopped needing her to respond, the moment you stopped fearing her withdrawal, the moment you stopped being emotionally available on demand. That's when she loses. That's when the game ends, because she realizes she's no longer dealing with the man who wanted her approval. She's now faced with a man who respects himself too much to let someone else define his peace. And that version of you, she can't reach him, she can't seduce him, she can't guilt trip him, love bomb him, or trigger him into proving anything, because he has nothing left to prove. He's at peace, he's rebuilding, he's recalibrating every area of his life to be so fulfilled, so stable, and so purposeful that there's no room left for chaos. And the more you level up, the more her behavior starts to make sense in hindsight. You see that she wasn't strong, she was reactive, she wasn't confident, she was just good at pretending. She didn't love you, she loved controlling how much of yourself you'd give away just to keep her around. But now you've shifted. You've placed your energy where it belongs, in your purpose. You've started writing your goals, taking care of your health, building discipline, focusing on your financial trajectory, and protecting your emotional boundaries like your life depends on it, because it does. You're no longer the man who needs her understanding. You're the man who understands himself. And when she feels that unspoken boundary, when she senses that her texts no longer disrupt your flow, when she realizes that you're now the version of you she once hoped you'd never become, that's when her confidence collapses. Not because you were cruel, not because you disrespected her, but because she could no longer use your love against you. And now, without that power, she has nothing left. No buttons to push, no games to play. Just the reality that she overplayed her hand and underestimated the man who finally chose himself. And that, more than any argument or revenge, is what strips her of the influence she thought she'd have forever. She thought you'd chase. You walked. She thought you'd argue. You went silent. She thought you'd explain. You closed the chapter without her permission. And now, in that echo of absence, she hears something louder than words. Your growth, your transformation, your indifference. And that's the sound she never expected, but the one she'll never forget. If you're done being the man who explains himself to people who only ever used your emotions against you, if you're ready to become the man who's not controlled by guilt, not broken by rejection, and not desperate for approval, then it's time. The Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men is linked in the comments, and it's the one thing most men will never get their hands on, until it's too late. This isn't just knowledge. This is years of heartbreak, manipulation, and confusion reversed in pages you'll own forever. Don't wait until you're shattered to start healing. If you're ready to finally walk in power, comment, "I choose me," like this video, and subscribe. Because every click helps another man break free from the lies that are stealing his future.